domination. And I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the idea of a democratic and free society in which all persons will live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an idea for which I hope to live for and to see realized. But my Lord, if it needs be, it is an idea.
Just to finish those words off, if needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die. In June 1964, Nelson Mandela was convicted for sabotage under apartheid government for his role as an ANC activist. Among other things, Madiba was accused of inciting strikes by workers and leaving the country without the government's permission. During the Rivonia Trial, instead of testifying, Nelson Mandela chose to make that speech you heard a moment or two ago that held the court spellbound for quite some time. We're joined now by Ron Anderson, who is a former Star reporter, to take us back in time. He was there on the day the speech was made. He was covering proceedings there. Mr. Anderson, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Morning.
So you're in the courtroom, you're listening to Nelson Mandela make this iconic speech. Throngs of people have gathered outside, possibly in utter disbelief at the words coming out of his mouth. He's willingly handing himself over for death, many people thought. What are you thinking? What's going on at that time?
Well, journalists, first of all, think of how they're going to report it for their newspaper. And so you have to switch off a bit from the excitement of the court. So the first thing I did, I went to Brian Fisher, who was the leading defense advocate, and I said, "Have you got a copy of the speech?" And he said, "Yes," and he gave me a copy, which was a great help for us in reporting. But I'll never forget the dignity of Mandela as he stood there and read the speech. We learnt afterwards that he'd spent 2 weeks by himself in jail, writing the speech in longhand, and then he subsequently had it typed by one of the other defence people. And there was big discussion amongst the accused as to the last paragraph, the famous last paragraph. Some of them thought it would provoke the judge into giving the death sentence. He said, "I'm prepared to die." Well, it wouldn't be so bad. The judge said, "Oh, you're prepared to die?" You know, die. Others said, "No, it'll have the opposite effect." And so there was this discussion amongst them. And ultimately, it wasn't all written out. But Mandela, as he says in his book, Long Walk to Freedom, I memorized that last paragraph, and I stood up and I delivered it looking the judge straight in the eye, not reading it.
There are various other aspects of that speech. I think you touch on the one that's most profound and most quoted, one of my personal favorite quotes as well. But there are other excerpts, if I could say that rang true for you, or that stuck with you as a young journalist at the time. What else did he say in that speech that made you think,
You see, the whole basis at the back of the trial was whether the Umkhonto we seized with the ANC, whether they had embarked on warfare. They said, "We've only embarked on sabotage. We're not going to injure people. We're going to blow up pylons, and, you know, in the middle of the night we might put a bomb in a railway station or something like that." They said they had not prepared and were not going to fight urban warfare. And that was the whole basis of their argument. And so the speech repeatedly made this point. But it was a very, very good analysis of the history, the political history of this country. and how apartheid had forced blacks into totally inferior positions. Just to give one example that I can remember, in the school system, only 40% of black children went to school at all. And in the year before he spoke, only 362 had passed matric. I mean, that's incredible. And the Prime Minister said, you know, we're going to keep blacks at a level below the whites. I mean, he said it just like that, boldly, unashamedly. So the whole impression was given from this speech how the blacks were being oppressed. And he was quite right. It wasn't a famous speech in the sense that Martin Luther King, I have a dream sort of thing, because it was in a courtroom. And he never overplayed his hand. He kept things simple, straightforward, and true.
Now, as a journalist, I mean, I'm looking at the legal proceedings that are dominating headlines in South Africa at the moment. Yeah. Nothing at the same level as Madiba, of course, but we look at the Oscar Pistorius trial. Yeah. Among the journalists of today, many are saying, is he guilty? Is he not guilty? Will he go to jail? Will he not go to jail? What was the conversation like at that time among your peers? Did you think he would hang?
It was never the death sentence, or the possibility of the death sentence was never mentioned in court, but it was always lurking there. You could see that the whole defense strategy under Brown Fisher was to prevent the death sentence. And so we didn't discuss it much because it wasn't openly discussed, but it was behind the scenes in a passive way. It was mentioned the whole time how they had tried everything to negotiate and been slapped down by the apartheid forces. And so it wasn't a big topic, except it was key to the trial.
And of course you had security police surveying your house as well, yes, taking a look at who comes to visit you, what you're saying to whom, yes, etc. So it wasn't something that you could be at liberty to discuss or divulge.
No.
Just in closing, I wanted to ask you, it was very tough for black journalists at that time as well. I'd imagine for white journalists too, that you may have feared for your life, that you may have wondered whether or not this country will go up in flames. Looking back and looking at that speech, what has been the significance thereof, in your opinion?
I'll never forget, after the court had ended that day, I was walking across Church Square to the Star's office holding the speech, and I suddenly penetrated. I'm holding here a bit of history, a bit of South African history. This is probably the most momentous speech ever delivered in South Africa, because here was a man, as I've said before, of such great dignity, and he'd controlled emotions. There was no histrionics, no nothing, and that made it all the more powerful that he could put forward the political realities in such a simple and yet forceful manner.
Thank you so much for your time, for your insight, and for availing yourself this Easter Friday, Good Friday. Thank you so much for your memories that you shared with us as well. We'll have to leave it there for now. We will continue to discuss that speech a little bit later on the show, as we speak to various people who have some ideas and insights and some sort of influence on what happened on that day. But we'll leave it there for now. Quick ad break. Morning Live continues after.